Okay, then the next speaker is Matthijs Hollanders. Martijn actually is an alumni student of landscape architecture. I'll see you after we meet here again. Yeah? After you're finished there. Thank you. Yes, okay. So Matthijs Hollanders is an alumni student of us. And when were you graduated? Did you graduate, Matthijs? 2018 or 19?
3 years ago.
3 years ago. Oh, not that long ago. Okay.
No.
So yeah, that was very nice to have.
New to me.
Yeah, I always get it wrong as well, so I can't help you. But I think that you die kant. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And yeah, now he's working for the Urbanism, but you can also introduce yourself more. So please go ahead. Thank you very much.
Yes. Hi. I'm Matthijs Hollanders, and I'm a landscape designer at the Urbanism in Rotterdam. And yeah, so 3 years ago I was here as a student, but now I'm back. And I really liked Greg's talk, and I always have the feeling that we are already quite radical and pushing boundaries in our office, but this was sort of next level radical. And yeah, this is our office. The people in our office, we're not that big. We're with 11 people right now. And we do projects that range from large scale visions up until projects that are actually realized on a smaller scale, but also bigger projects. I'm also going to dive into the Hofbogen Park in Rotterdam and the Tidal Park in Rotterdam, which is right next to our office. And we also work a lot for municipalities. This is our office and our office biotopes, as we call it. It's a former harbor area and an old industrial building. And right next to it, there used to be a river basin, but it's filled with soil, and now there's a food garden. And in the food garden, we also have our sponge garden, where we do tests with soil, the different soils that exist in Rotterdam. And we test how we can make the sponginess of these soils better, how to improve that, but also see how maintenance changes this way of sponginess, and also how to increase biodiversity within the soil. And you already see in the background the tidal park, Keilehaven, which in this picture is still just a river harbor basin, but it's currently being constructed into a tidal park. Yeah, actually in all our projects, climate change is the basis of the project, or the goal is to counter the climate change. Of course, we can't do it all by ourselves, but at least make space for water, improve the quality of our urban environment, because we're a landscape and urbanism firm, but we always look at the landscape within the urban context. Another very important thing is biodiversity loss, also within the cities. And I think that's going to be the focus of today. And yeah, it's really about looking how can the urban environment contribute to making the ecological value, to increase it, to make it better, but also to bring it back to the people living in the cities. And that's what I want to start with, that it means that we need a change of perspective, really dive into other organisms, how they perceive their surroundings, because we build our environment for our own reasons. We have our facilities that we need, our networks, and the buildings in which we live. But animals and plants and other organisms, they really, use this environment in a different way. So they also need different things. And if we want to design for them, we need to dive into their perspective. And I chose this picture to show a human-made network. And for all of us, it's really clear that you would not drive on the left picture, but the right one is the network that can actually be used by people. But in this picture, it's less obvious that there's a network on the left which is not working properly, and a network on the right in which roots can really connect to each other, trees can exchange nutrients. So it's a different network. It's not our network, but by looking also at these networks, we can improve the quality within an urban context for other species, and we will also benefit from it. It's not only the networks above ground that are in conflict with the networks of other species, because we also tend to fill the entire soil with other cables and yeah, these kind of things. And it interrupts with the natural root system, the soil life. So we need to think about this. And yeah, we only tend to think, and it's actually the same street as you saw before, we only realize that we also depend on the right networks for these other organisms if we have an unfriendly reminder like this and the trees fall down upon your roof. But it has to do with the conflict that we only thought about our own networks. So we have our human habitat, in which this might not be the most pleasant street, but there are car parks, we have streets, we have a walking way, and buildings in which the people can live. But wouldn't it be much nicer if there's also places for other species to live? And it even improves the environment for ourselves. And it's about providing places to stay, for instance, the beds that they can hide during the day, but also that a hedgehog can move from garden to garden. And it's really simple things, but it really means that you need to dive into the needs of these other species. And it doesn't stop with only the mammals or the birds, but also really looking at the plants and the insects and how this natural system works. So yeah, talking about ecological urbanism, I think that it means that we should design to provide places for other species to settle. We need a room and a roof and walls, but actually with every building we put into the urban environment, often other qualities for other organisms get lost. And I think as designers, it's our task to make sure that the entire surface, so the walls and the roofs, everything contributes to the landscape in the city, and plants and animals can find their way. And it also doesn't always need to be planned by us, but we just have to provide the conditions for other organisms to attach themselves to our buildings or structures. And sometimes it might be very difficult, but nature is quite resourceful. So everywhere where we might make a tiny mistake or leave a gap or just didn't think about it, nature will find its way. Not all nature, but there are quite some species that just arrive by themselves and already find a happy place in our urban environment. And yeah, it means that from the previous pictures show unintentional places for organisms to go. But as designers, we want to design intentional places for animals and plants and other organisms. And I brought this project that we're working on. It's actually sort of finished, but it still needs to be constructed. But the design is finished. It's the Hofbogenpark in Rotterdam. It's a former train viaduct going straight through the city, and it's 2 kilometers long and only 8 meters wide, which is not that wide. And a lot of people immediately think of the High Line in New York. It's a bit different, especially the budget. But I think what we did here might even be better than what has been done there, because it's way more focused on ecology, its connection to the surroundings, not necessarily a tourist attraction. Of course, it probably will be, but it's really designed as a park for the entire neighborhood, all the neighborhoods that attach to this line going straight through the city. Underneath the Hofbogen, underneath the park, or the structure, the current structure, there is a lot of people. There's offices and just shops. But on top, there's not a lot happening yet. But it's a really nice view, and that's something we should give back to the people, but also to the other organisms. And it means that we need a network park. That's how we call it. So it doesn't only mean that it's just a line from A to B, but it's a network both in length, but also in width. So also connecting to all these streets that attach to it. And on top of this park, we also looked into these different perspectives. So we have the people that need to use the park. They want to take a walk, or they want to sit down somewhere. But you also have the ground-related animals, the birds and the bees. And they all need something different. They need a different landscape. They need a place to settle. They need to find food, safety. And we try to incorporate that in the design. And it means that we try to invite all these animals and take into account the different biotopes that are needed. And well, design also the planting plan according to it. There are wet areas more towards the polder in the north of Rotterdam, and more dry biotopes close to the city center. And accessibility even goes as far as making stairs for hedgehogs, which might seem yeah, a bit odd. And of course, we never know if the hedgehog is actually gonna arrive. But we thought, yeah, who are we to not make the hedgehog be able to visit our park? So really being all inclusive. And then I have a short side visit to the water square. And that's one of the first projects that the Urbanisten made far before my time, at least the time that I worked there. And it's a square which combines both as a being a public square for people to enjoy, and a water buffer. And it has a capacity of 1,700 cubic meters. And this water is thereby sort of extracted from the surroundings. There used to be a lot of cellars that got flooded. And by this square, the water can be captured. And then later, after the big rain event, can be released to the sewage system. So it's only to reduce flooding and to temporarily store the water. But the nice thing, it's a nice square also, but the nice thing now with the Hofbogen Park is that we can use this water and bring it up to the Hofbogen Park, because the water square lies right next to the park. And it's actually sort of giving even more value to this square, which is nice for the story, but also really nice for the park, because it means that we can bring the water up. The water is cleaned by the vegetation on the roof, And because we can clean it, we are allowed to bring the water to the lower seasonal storages in the soil. And that allows us to, in times of drought, bring it back up. And that's very important because, of course, it's a roof garden. And yeah, you have to water it, but we don't want to use tap water for it. The water that falls on the roof itself might not be enough. So we can use all the water from the surroundings um, and well, clean it, store it, and bring it back up when needed in order to have a vibrant and healthy ecosystem on top of this roof. And another nice thing is that it's what I said, it's for ecology, it's nice, it cleans stuff, but it's also a public park. It's also for people. And I think that's always the good combination or an important combination that you think of both. And that's sometimes difficult. I tend sometimes to think more of the animals than of the people. But that's nice in an office that you have all your different focuses. But it's also a very nice park for people, and that's needed also to support well, the ideas that we have for ecology. Then for the vegetation, we look at it not only from the perspective of making a nice park, and that's, for instance, a difference from the High Line, in which it's mainly an aesthetic garden or park, and here we really put an effort to not only have an aesthetic park, but also look at the plants and how they relate to these different animals. For instance, the stingy nettle, brandnetel. We don't want it everywhere, but it may be there, and we want to keep it in some places because the butterflies need to lay their eggs. It's important for the balance of the ecosystem. Some species just need it to survive. The same counts actually for the seasons, the seasonal changes, in which, for instance, in early spring, you have flowers for the bumblebees that come out of the ground. They need nectar, they need food. And in winter, you need seed heads for the birds to feed. And the upside of this is that you have a diversity, and you can go to the park as a human, go to the park and experience the park in different ways in different times of the season. So there's a benefit for the animals and a benefit for the people. And this is actually a view more into the future, sort of the vision that, well, we envision that our park is not one thing by itself because it's only 8 meters. So what can we actually achieve on this 8 meters? But the goal is to extend it, and yeah, even further than what we show here. But this image is, I think, really nice because it really shows sort of the ambition that we have, and I think we all need to have, to make most of all the surface that we build. That the roofs and the facades, but also the soil, everything behind it, makes a place or provides places for others to settle and not only us. Another thing, and I don't even know where this image came from. We didn't make it ourselves, but it shows that we also need to think in time, not only in years, but also some animals might use the park at a different time of the day. And we need to take that into account. The second project I want to go into is the river as a tidal park. And after this, I'm gonna dive more deep into the tidal park Keilehave, which is sort of an follow-up of this larger vision for the entire river. Because if we go way back, we had a natural system, a dynamic landscape, and there was this tiny village, Rotterdam, that came into to being there. And what we actually see is that even up till the 1900s, it wasn't that big yet. It was still mainly a dynamic tidal landscape. But from the 1900s, you see industrialization, and you see that nature was, well, maybe pushed out, or at least had to give space up. And it became more and more a hard surface for people, for human activity, industrial activity. The funny thing is actually that we still have a lot of tidal influence in Rotterdam. And actually, because we have this harbor activity and this connection to the sea, that makes it still something we can experience. But we don't really experience it because we have all these hard edges. So only when there's a really high water level and the quays are overwhelmed by the water, then we notice, okay, we have a tidal difference, or the water can rise up. But on normal days, we don't notice it. And that's a pity. So the river as a tidal park is a vision for the entire river area of Rotterdam, the delta, and it focuses on giving a ecological perspective for the river banks. Also, how to connect the river banks towards the land behind the dikes, but also how the land interacts with the water. And yeah, we also always show this picture when talking about the river, because we all know the Erasmus Bridge. That's the icon of Rotterdam. But we say, well, maybe we should look at another icon. Maybe the fish are the icon. And well, here we see an image of the tidal park Keilehave, which is right next to our office, and it's quite a small tidal park, but it's also one of the first in the city, and it's also an experiment actually, and it makes it really nice because we were allowed to experiment a bit. But it's also a showcase of how all these edges along the water can evolve. So it's very easy to expand this. It's also only the first part of the actual design that's now under construction. Well, here you see in the red circle our office, and then in the white area, the place where the park is currently going to be built. What it started off with, this design, is actually intensive monitoring. So we went into the field and we looked what species we could find. And the nice thing about this, and I think that's something we as designers should do even more, really go into the field, because there were ecologists that said, this plant is never gonna be there. But it was already there. So it's always important to not only do your desk research and what is expected, but just go into the field and see what's already there and how can we use this in the design. So that's what we did. We looked at this dynamic planting scheme that was already there, and we just gave it more space. We already saw in the previous one, there was already a gradient of planting, but it was really small. The area was really small. And by extending this gradient, we could give more space to these plants, and we could sort of showcase the plant communities that exist, make it visible, not only make more space for the plants, but also make it visible to the public that we have these dynamics, and that the higher you come, the drier it is, which means you have different plant species that will thrive. So yeah, the main idea of the park is that we have different terraces on different levels, and at different times of the day, it will be flooded. So we have a main low water level of minus 0.45, and the main high water, which is plus 124. So that's already more than 1.5 meter daily difference, which is, I think, new to a lot of people in Rotterdam because you don't notice it. The nice thing about it is, yeah, nature will develop. We will plant a little upfront, but we will also just let nature decide what is gonna happen, which plants are gonna settle in this area. But spatially, it's also very interesting because you can go back to the park every time of the day, and you will experience a completely different park. You also, the weather might change, but also the width of the park, because the water might have been higher. So that's another dimension. Again, time. So previously it was about day and night, but now it's about this tidal dynamic, which changes over time. And what we provide here is also on these different terraces, habitats, or actually different biotopes. And yeah, it's really interesting. This is what we expect on forehand, what could arrive in the area. But we're actually daily monitoring it during our lunch breaks, what's already there. Currently, it's mainly swans and some geese. But 2 days ago, I also already saw a kingfisher flying around just in between the construction people. So something's gonna happen in the future. The first thing which was done, because they're building it, the first thing what was done is undeepening the harbor, because it was deep, because there needed to be big ships. But it also means that light doesn't enter the bottom of the basin. So we needed to heighten it so that light can enter and plants can start growing. So that was the first thing. And a nice detail about it is that the picture on the right shows how it was constructed, because it's actually a woven willow twig construction. Used to be a bit more common in the Netherlands, but now I think there were even no Dutch companies anymore that knew how to do it. But that was lowered into the basin to keep the sand that was put there in its place. And then we started also designing for what we can't see. And I think that's really even more extreme, into getting into another perspective, looking at the park from the view of fish or shellfish, and birds that need to hunt for their prey under the water. But it's really a new way of designing. We don't design for something that is aesthetically pleasing for people, but is very valuable for other species. And we did that by actually just throwing in a lot of this is actually the experimental part of it. So these artificial reefs, binding trees, so dead trees on the bottom, and so we have an underwater forest, and also making stairs that have some lower parts so that puddles are created when the water is going down. And we also said to the maintenance people or so the municipality is gonna maintain it, that they might need a different way of maintaining this park. Because the municipality has these sort of fact sheets of different types of park and how they need to be maintained. And our park didn't really fit into those sheets because it's quite different. For instance, we say these beautiful yellow and green colors on the stones, would be great if it arrives in the park. So please don't clean it. But according to the sheets, they should. And of course, we can't just let nature completely take over, even though we might want to, but it's still also a park for people. So what we did is set some rules, a spatial framework to say, for instance, to the maintenance people, how far can things go? What are the boundaries within which this park can evolve? So if a tree falls down, we say it's great. It's a dead tree, and animals can can benefit from it. But of course, if it falls on a street, then the street is not useful anymore. So that's sort of the boundaries, but also the spatial boundaries that we set are sort of within all these walls. Things can happen if they interact too much with the walls, then it might become a problem. But I think that's always a sort of also working together with these people that need to maintain it. Don't only think of the design as something which is sort of fixed and this is what's on paper and that's how it's going to be realized, but it also needs to be maintained. So it also means that we have to think again about time, and in this case, really time in years, because we don't know how the park will evolve. We don't know how it will develop. Things will change, things will grow, but things will also die. And another thing related to maintenance again is we don't want all the grass to be mowed all the time, because the grass is also valuable for insects and other species. But it can sometimes already help to just mow a tiny strip along the sides, and then people think it looks clean, and then the rest of the field can still be wild. And it's these kind of smart little interventions that can combine the ambition to make it biodiverse and ecologically valuable and still be an aesthetically pleasing public park that doesn't look untidy. Well, as I said, it's currently under construction, and you already see, well, I said the kingfisher was flying around. It was too fast to make a picture, but the swans and the seagulls are actually daily visitors, and they are really not bothered by all the constructing people. And then I arrive at my final list. I thought I'd make a list of the things that, well, I went through in this presentation to sort of sum up the guidelines or rules or things we also always want to take into account when we work on a project. So the first thing is, in every project we have to work with climate adaptation. We want to, but we also have to. That's often the main task, that we have to deal with climate issues. Water needs to be stored somewhere. We need to prevent flooding. There's a drought problem or heat stress. But often it's related to ecology, but there's also sometimes conflicts with ecology. but I think we should always try to combine both of them. For instance, if you have for climate adaptation, we also think about energy consumption, and in a lot of projects there are solar panels on roofs, and there's always the discussion, should the roof be green or should we have solar panels? And of course, if you don't have green, you can put a little bit more solar panels. But in this case, I would say ecology and climate adaptation should go hand in hand, should always be combined. And then I think we should always link it to the bigger ecological networks. And it doesn't depend on the scale. Even in a tiny project, you should look at the bigger scale. And also, even if there's a gap in your ecological network as it currently is, I think it's good that you still try to have the highest ambitions, because the network might change. These links might be fixed in the future, even if it's not part of your project. If you already provide the conditions for something in the future to develop itself, then you did a good job. So we need to provide these conditions, and yeah, what I said, so the entire Earth's surface should be inhabitable by something or someone. But we need to design for it, especially nowadays that we have buildings that are way less permeable or bioreceptive. They're really closed off. We don't make mistakes anymore, unfortunately. We don't leave gaps or, yeah. So we need to intentionally design these places, conditions for organisms to settle. Design for the invisible, and it means the invisible which we can see. For instance, the underwater world, but also the soil. Some animals move through the water, some move through the soil, and some move through darkness. So these are all invisible things for us, but we should take that into account when we design. Guide the spontaneous. And with that, I mean that we shouldn't want to fix everything in a certain position. For instance, in a planting plan, you at the start, you say, okay, these plants need to go there, these plants need to go there, but also leave some space for spontaneous things to happen. Some plants might move over time, and yeah, it just means that they found a better spot. Don't try to fix everything in one position, and leave something up to nature, because nature itself knows best where it wants to be. Appreciate the wild. Yeah, that's actually sort of embracing the wild, but it also needs a shift in how we think of things. So I might be okay with something not being that clean, but I think the majority of people, especially in the city, want things to look clean. And that's, for instance, smartly using only, for instance, smartly using maintenance to make something look more clean than it actually is. If we actually want to go for cleanness. And then include time. And again, that's about daily time, so day and night, about the seasons, but also time in years or decades or centuries. And with time, it's about growth and also about decay. And last but not least, include monitoring. And that's what we did for the Keilahave to start with. Really investigate your project site and see what's already there, what you can hook onto, what qualities are there, what needs to be preserved, and what can you use in your design. And also afterwards, to learn from it yeah, how things are developing over time. So, as I said, we're daily going to the tidal park to see what's happening. And now they're still constructing it, but when it's really finished, we will really see how plants will arrive and how things are doing. And maybe things are not doing the things we expected, but then in our next tidal park, we can use this and do it in a different way. And then I'm through my list, so then it's time for questions.
Right. Thank you very much, Matthijs. There was already a question here.
About social security of the Hofbogen Park. What's your opinion about that? Because I know there are certain bad elements in the society which are not so nice.
Yeah.
And you have to recognize it because park is a very good hiding place for bad things. You know, it's I can
True.
sum up a lot of things.
Very true. Yeah. The one thing I know about the park that it's gonna be closed at night. So at night there are no bad things gonna happen. And yeah, during the day the expectation is that there's enough activity in the park, and of course a lot of eyes on the park because it's right next to buildings. So in that sense, there's social security. And it's only 8 meters wide, so there's also not that much place to hide. Yeah, but definitely something that has been taken into account. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there more questions? We have one up there. That's okay. You need the exercise.
Yeah. I really liked the remark you made about appreciating the wilderness as one ambition. It made me think about my parents' garden because we live in a neighborhood where my mother always thinks we should maintain the garden more to make our neighbors pleased, but actually we have quite a lot of animals in our garden, so I think it's a really nice example on a more personal scale. But in relation to that, also had a question maybe to you. Which potential do you see, for example, in kind of grassroots movements? Because, for example, urban gardening movements that are maybe often kind of also perceived in the public eye as being something illegal, even though it adds to nature. It shows how active people also want to engage certain groups. So do you think maybe also, I mean, you hinted at that kind of change in perception that is also needed next to the physical design. Do you think that there's, for example, need in also municipalities, but also architectural firms to become more active and also really engaging people in creating this mind shift towards recognizing wilderness as something positive in the city?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things is smartly incorporating simple tools, for instance, like mowing just a tiny strip along the sides, which makes people already feel as if it's neat. So you sort of give them what they want, but you still keep what you want. And especially, for instance, the tidal park, it's a park within the city where we could already go quite wild. And it brings this idea closer to the people. So I think that's definitely one of the goals of the park, to engage people and make them aware of the beauty of these tidal influences. Also how for instance the stones will weather over time, and that we say, okay, keep it. And of course it's gonna be tricky because the stones might become slippery, and then it's becoming dangerous. So there's always a sort of conflict, but it was definitely a goal, and I think it should be a goal for designers to not only sort of push the boundaries and push people to just accept it, but to make them more aware of these kind of things. For instance, also the beauty of dead plants. A lot of people don't see it. I see it. I'm looking forward now to all the dead plants around us, because it's beautiful shapes. But we need to bring it to the people and explain it, and then they might understand it at some point.
Okay, thank you. Are there more questions?
How do you put together the biotopes, and do you think there's like a standard method so other people can also more easily do it, or other design firms?
Well, one of the things what I always do in a project is look what's already there. So that's using waarnemingen.nl to see what species are there in the area. And it doesn't tell you everything. It often tells you that there's a weird guy walking around in this area looking at only grasshoppers or something like that. So it's not a complete story that you can see, but it already tells you something. And looking back at what the landscape used to look like. So what were the sort of natural biotopes that used to be there. But of course, we are often in an urban context, and that's a very different biotope. So you should also be honest if a certain biotope still fits within this urban environment, because it changed. I think something like that.
Maybe talk to an ecologist or
definitely.
natuurvereniging. There's nature organizations,
Yeah.
IVN, Natuurrijk Delft, London Delft, for instance, and every city has that. If you Google quickly, you really find specialists who can bring this together and can help you out very quickly. They're very eager to help.
Indeed, and that's one thing I learned, or I think is very important. What I learned in my first 3 years working experience is that you really need to look for sort of people that have same ambitions but can bring you just a little bit further, because they are the experts. For instance, ecologists. I know quite a lot about ecology, but I don't know the details. So you need to talk to them, and they give you insights in what specific things can be expected, or
More questions? That's okay. No, I can.
It's not related that much to the topic of ecology, but I think also in comparison to the other people who presented today, since you're quite recently graduated in comparison and still young, since I'm also in a few years gonna join the working the working environment. How do you think, reflecting on the time that you work now in the company or in general after your studies, kind of the difference in age groups, and for example, you entering an environment where you maybe work with a lot of people from previous generations who might have different views as you. Do you think that your maybe different views and kind of newer ideas are embraced, and you really have a lot of chances to also integrate those, or do you rather feel that sometimes you feel the things that you want to propose are rejected and are not really embraced?
I don't have the feeling that it's that much related to age, because there are older people that have the same ambitions and want to do reach really high, and there are young people that are already quite conservative. So actually, that yeah differs quite a lot. Um, so it's mainly just really looking for the right partners, and we are always doing that as an office. I'm doing it, but yeah, we are also always still looking for the right partners to work with that have the same ambitions, and that's of course a big difference from when you study. There you can do it by yourself, and you can just stick to your own ambitions. And yeah, in the work field, you have to deal with the actual rules and politics and all these kind of things, and also more conservative parties with also different goals. The easy thing about being a landscape designer is that you can just have your ambitions and hopefully they will follow, and you have to convince them, but you're not often the one that needs to pay for things or is responsible for accidents, or you have to think about certain things. But I think that's the biggest difference, and just the reality of what you will experience after after being here.
Okay, thank you. One last burning question. If not, maybe it was on the sheets, Matthijs, so it's not a question but more a remark that to add to that, the tidal park has won the Natuur Inclusief Bouwen Award from BirdLife Netherlands, so the Vogelbescherming, which was awarded during the Dutch Design Week last week. So congratulations, nice
Thanks.
work, good job. And as you see, I saw 12 people working in the office when I counted. And how many of them used to be students of landscape architecture here?
4.
4, okay.
All from the same year also. So
that's, okay.
Not all
okay,
joined
that's,
at the same
okay,
moment, but in the end we all ended up at the Urbanist.
And of course you need to have a mix of people from different backgrounds. So don't go to 12, but it's nice to hear that. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I hope we could give you a nice lineup of speakers. Also, thank you very much to Green City Seats and Esther, who is actually preparing some drinks and some food which has been brought. So please stay a bit longer to have a snack or something to drink. And safely home today with the storm. And we hope to see you next time with the forestry urbanism, which is what date? 14 December. 14 December is het over forestry urbanism. In de Berlage zaal hier bij Bouwkunde. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much. And